What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors sits across from a daytime talk show host who's convinced she knows everything about his career, his choices, and his beliefs? What happens when that host pushes a little too far, says the wrong thing, and suddenly finds herself face to face with a man who refuses to be intimidated? Today, we're breaking down one of the most explosive fictional confrontations ever imagined on live television, a moment so intense that producers, in a state of absolute panic, were forced to remove the host from her own show. Make sure you subscribe and drop a comment, because this story will leave you breathless. The morning of February 15th began like any other at The View's New York City studios. Joy Behar arrived early, coffee in one hand, pages of highlighted notes in the other, prepping for the day's headline interview. Denzel Washington was scheduled to appear to promote his latest directorial, project a film already sending shockwaves across the country for its unflinching portrayal of systemic challenges in America. Joy believed she was ready, or so she thought. "Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to The View," Joy announced, her trademark smile shining beneath the stage lights. "We have a very special guest joining us today. He's a two-time Academy Award winner, actor, director, producer, and someone who has never shied away from speaking his mind. Please welcome the legendary Denzel Washington." Thunderous applause filled the studio as Denzel walked onto the set, his presence instantly commanding respect. Clad in a sharp navy suit and radiating quiet confidence, he waved to the crowd before taking his seat across from Joy. The energy shifted. Everyone felt it. This wasn't going to be an ordinary interview. Denzel. "Thank you so much for being here," Joy began, her warmth carrying a subtle edge. "Your new film has certainly sparked conversation. Some are calling it your most important work yet, while others have concerns about the message you're sending." Denzel leaned back, a small, knowing smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Well, Joy, I appreciate being here. And as for the film, its message is simple. We're telling the truth about real people facing real issues. If that truth makes folks uncomfortable, maybe they should be asking themselves why." Joy cut in quickly, her tone sharpening. "But don't you think, with your influence, you have a responsibility to be a little more careful? Your film is critical of law enforcement and the justice system. Aren't you worried about the impact that could have?" The smile faded. Denzel leaned forward, eyes fixed on hers. "Careful, Joy. I've been in this industry over 40 years. I've played cops, criminals, heroes, villains, but this film isn't about being careful, it's about being honest. If honesty makes people uncomfortable, that's their burden, not mine." Joy blinked, taken aback. She wasn't used to guests pushing back, let alone pushing this hard. "Honest?" she echoed skeptically. "But whose version of the truth are we talking about? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're pushing a very specific narrative, one that paints law enforcement in a negative light. Is that really fair?" The temperature in the room dropped. "Fair," Denzel repeated. "Let me ask you this. When a young man gets pulled over for driving in the wrong neighborhood, is that fair? When a family loses someone to police misconduct and the officer walks away with paid leaves, that fair? We're not talking stories. We're talking reality." Joy tried again, her voice rising. "But you can't paint all law enforcement with the same brush. There are good cops out there, officers who risk their lives every day to protect communities." Denzel nodded slowly, and this film doesn't deny that. But if acknowledging uncomfortable truths threatens people more than the truths themselves, that says everything. Don't they deserve better than to be lumped in with the bad actors? Joy pressed. Denzel's jaw tightened. For a moment, the entire studio fell silent. So silent, the hum of the cameras felt deafening. "Of course, there are good officers, Joy," he said at last. "But that's not what this conversation is really about, is it? This is about you trying to shove me into a box, trying to turn me into the angry black man who's anti-police." He paused, eyes steady. "Well, I'm not playing that role for you. I'm not putting you in any box," Joy protested, though her tone betrayed her. "I'm asking legitimate questions about the responsibility that comes with your platform. You have millions of fans who trust you. When you release a film showing law enforcement in such a negative light, don't you think you owe it to the officers themselves to offer a more balanced view? Denzel slowly leaned forward, locking eyes with her. Let me tell you something about responsibility, Joy. My responsibility is to tell stories that matter, to shine a light on the issues people would rather keep in the dark. If you want balance, turn on the evening news. They'll give you plenty of stories about heroic officers. But that's not the story I'm telling, because that's not the story that needs to be told right now. The tension was now unbearable. Audience members shifted uncomfortably. The other hosts sat frozen, hands clasped, unsure whether to step in or stay silent. But Joy, either oblivious or ignoring the warning signs, pressed on. So what you're saying, your truth is the only truth that matters? She asked, her voice dipping into mockery. That your perspective outweighs the perspectives of thousands of law enforcement officers who risk their lives every day. That was the moment everything shifted. Denzel's composure, steady, despite Joy's increasingly aggressive questioning, finally cracked. Not in anger, but in something far more chilling. Disappointment laced with quiet fury. Joy, he said softly. So softly the audience leaned in to hear. I think you fundamentally misunderstand what's happening here. The words hit like a thunderclap. Joy blinked, taken aback. For the first time that morning, she seemed to realize she might have crossed a line. But instead of stepping back, she stepped over it. Oh, I understand perfectly, she snapped, her voice dripping with condescension. I understand that you've built a career on playing the victim, on pointing fingers instead of taking responsibility, and now you want to use your fame to push some kind of anti-establishment agenda. Well, I'm sorry, Denzel, but some of us actually live in the real world. The collective gasp from the audience was instant. Even the camera operators hesitated, uncertain whether to keep filming. But Joy wasn't done. You sit up in your ivory tower, she continued, waving a dismissive hand, making millions, while everyday Americans, including cops, struggle to keep their communities safe. And then you have the audacity to lecture us about truth and justice? Give me a break. Denzel rose slowly to his feet, his 6-foot frame casting a long shadow across the table. When he spoke, his voice was calm to calm. Joy, listen carefully. I'm only going to say this once. Oh, here we go, Joy muttered with a nervous laugh, looking toward the audience for backup. The great Denzel Washington is about to lecture us poor, ignorant folks on how the world really works. Sit down, Denzel said quietly. The room froze. The sarcasm drained from Joy's face as she met his eyes. There was no rage there. No theatrics, just something far more dangerous. It wasn't rage on Denzel's face, it was disappointment, wrapped in a quiet authority that pulled every eye toward him. You want to talk about the real world? He said, his voice low, but filling every corner of the studio. Let me tell you about the real world, Joy. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The real world is where I grew up, Mount Vernon, New York, where my father worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on, where my mother cleaned houses for families who wouldn't even let her sit at the same table as them. No. I didn't mean, Joy began. He lifted a hand, and the sound died in her throat. No, you had your chance. Now it's my turn. His tone was steady, deliberate, carrying a force that made the entire studio hold its breath. The real world, he continued, is where young men who look like me get followed around stores, where they get pulled over for driving nice cars, where they're assumed to be criminals before they even say a word. That's the reality my film is talking about. Joy shifted, her confidence evaporating. Her eyes darted to the audience, then back to him. I understand that, she said shakily. But surely you can see there are 2 sides to every story. 2 sides. Denzel's voice rose just a hair, but enough to shatter the calm. Joy. When a man is pinned to the ground with a knee on his neck, begging for breath, what's the other side of that story? When a 12-year-old boy is shot within seconds of officers arriving, what's the other side? When a woman is killed in her own bed because police stormed the wrong apartment, tell me, Joy, what's the other side? Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. Even the production crew had stopped moving. Every camera locked on Denzel. Every audience member frozen. Joy shrank into her seat. I wasn't trying to minimize those tragedies. She stammered, her usual bravado gone. But you have to admit you're using your platform to push a very one-sided view of law enforcement. Denzel let out a laugh. There was no humor in it. One-sided joy. You want to know what one-sided looks like? He didn't wait for an answer. One-sided is when officers who kill unarmed. People get desk duty, while the victims' families get death threats. One-sided is when peaceful protesters get tear gas, while armed militants get escorted to safety. One-sided is when people like you sit in comfortable studios telling people like me to be more balanced while our communities are under siege. That's not fair, Joy protested, her voice cracking. I've always supported civil rights. I'm one of the good guys. The good guys, Denzel repeated, disbelief coloring his tone. Joy, you just spent 15 minutes telling me my community's lived experiences are biased. You dismissed hundreds of families' pain as a one-sided narrative, and you think that makes you one of the good guys? Joy looked around desperately for support, for rescue, for anything. But no one was looking at her. Everyone was watching him. Her show had slipped out of her hands, and she knew it. I think maybe we should take a commercial break, she whispered, reaching for her earpiece. No. Denzel covered the earpiece with his hand. We're not taking a break. You started this conversation, and now we're going to finish it. Joy's face drained of color. You want to talk about responsibility? Denzel said, his voice gaining strength. Fine. Let's talk about yours. He took a step closer. The studio lights seemed to dim around him. You have a platform too, Joy. Millions watch this show. They trust you to treat guests with respect, to have real conversations, not to ambush people, not to score cheap political points, not to shove your worldview down someone's throat because it makes good TV. I was just doing my job, she protested weakly. Asking the tough questions viewers want answered? Your job? Denzel echoed, his voice finally rising. The anger he'd held back all interview cracked through, sharp and undeniable. Your job is to be a journalist, Joy, Denzel said, his voice steady but edged with steel. Not a prosecutor. Your job is to inform your audience, not humiliate your guests. Your job is to seek truth, not push your own agenda. Joy's face flushed a deep, alarming red. Whether it was anger or embarrassment, no one could tell. How dare you lecture me about journalism? She snapped, her instincts finally kicking into defensive overdrive. I've been doing this longer than you've been making movies. I don't need some Hollywood actor telling me how to do my job. That was it. The line she wasn't supposed to cross. Something in Denzel snapped it loudly, but cleanly, like a bone under too much pressure. The composed, dignified man who had spent the entire interview trying to keep the conversation civil evaporated in an instant. The man who remained was carved from righteous fury. Some Hollywood actor, he repeated quietly, the words vibrating with danger. Joy, let me tell you something about this Hollywood actor. He stepped forward. Every syllable heavy with lived experience. This Hollywood actor grew up in a world where he had to be twice as good to get half as much. This Hollywood actor has spent 40 years building a career while people like you questioned whether he deserved any of it. This Hollywood actor has used his success to lift others up, to tell stories that mattered, to shine a light in places most people would rather ignore. Joy opened her mouth to interject, but Denzel lifted a hand. The gesture carried so much authority, she froze mid-breath. But you know what really gets me, Joy? He said, eyes locked on hers. It's not that you disagree with me. It's not that you twist my words or warp my message. It's the disrespect. The casual, thoughtless disrespect you think you can get away with because you're sitting behind that desk and I'm just a guest on your show. The studio was dead silent. Even the camera operators had stopped moving, afraid to break the spell or provoke the storm. Joy sat stiffly, mouth slightly open, realizing far too late that she had pushed him past the point of return. You think because you've been on television for a few years that you get to talk down to me? Denzel continued, his voice rising. You think because you have a microphone and a camera, you can dismiss my experiences. My community, my truth is biased or one-sided. Denzel, please, Joy stammered, voice trembling for the first time. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I never meant to disrespect you. I admire your work. Your career? A misunderstanding? Denzel let out a laugh with no warmth behind it. No, Joy. The only misunderstanding here is your belief that you can question my integrity, my motivations, my right to tell the stories I choose, and think that's acceptable behavior. Joy shot a panicked look toward the control room, silently begging someone to cut to commercial, but no one moved. The producers were just as transfixed as the audience. You want to talk about responsibility? Denzel asked, leaning in until he was only inches from her. Here's your responsibility. Respect the people you invite onto your stage. When you bring someone here, you enter their time, their space, their story. Your responsibility is to ask thoughtful questions, to foster real dialogue, to treat your guests with the dignity you'd want for yourself. I do treat my guests with respect, Joy whispered, but even she didn't believe it. Do you? Denzel asked, voice rich with disbelief. Is this what you call respect? Because from where I'm standing, this looks like an ambush. Like you invited me here just to label me some kind of radical for having the audacity to make a film about real issues affecting real people. Joy swallowed hard, unable to meet his gaze. That's not. I wasn't trying to. I just think that when someone has a platform like yours... Stop. Denzel cut her off sharply. Just stop. Every word you're saying right now is making this worse. You're not apologizing. You're not taking responsibility. You don't even acknowledge what you did wrong. You're not apologizing, Denzel said, voice low but unrelenting. You're just making excuses trying to justify behavior that has no justification. The tension in the studio was unbearable. Several audience members sat with their hands covering their mouths. Others leaned forward, terrified to miss a single word. The other hosts of The View were frozen in place, wide-eyed and powerless, watching their show slip completely out of their control. You know what the real tragedy is here, Joy? Denzel continued, his voice dropping to a soft, devastating calm. The real tragedy is that you had an opportunity today. An opportunity to have a real conversation about real issues. To ask thoughtful questions about art, about storytelling, about the responsibility we all carry. But instead, he gestured around them. You chose to turn this into a gotcha moment. I was just trying to give viewers a balanced perspective. Joy insisted, but her voice had thinned into a desperate whine. Balanced. Denzel's voice rose, anger sharpening each syllable. Joy, there is nothing balanced about dismissing the experiences of an entire community. Nothing balanced about telling someone their truth is biased. Nothing balanced about using your platform to silence voices that make you uncomfortable. And then something no one expected happened. It started with a single clap, then another. And suddenly the entire studio audience was on its feet, clapping, cheering, erupting in support. A standing ovation? For Denzel? Joy looked around in horror as she realized her own audience was celebrating the man who had just dismantled her on live TV. Cut to commercial. She hissed into her earpiece. But the applause was so loud the control room couldn't hear her. Cut to commercial now. But Denzel wasn't done. He rose from his chair and turned to the main camera, speaking directly to the viewers at home with unwavering intensity. Ladies and gentlemen, he said over the roar of applause, this is what happens when people in power think they can silence voices that challenge their worldview. This is what happens when journalists forget that their job is to seek truth, not push agendas. And this is what happens when respect becomes a foreign concept. Joy gestured frantically to the producers and, finally, two stage managers emerged from behind the cameras. They approached her hesitantly. Ms. Behar, one said softly, we need you to come with us. What? Joy's voice spiked into panic. This is my show. You can't remove me from my own show. Ma'am, we have our orders, the other stage manager replied gently but firmly, taking her by the arm. We need to get you off the set. The audience fell silent again, stunned, as Joy Behar, the host of The View, was physically escorted off her own stage. Her protests echoed from backstage, but it only underscored how completely she had lost control. Denzel remained standing at the table, calm, composed, unshaken. He straightened his tie, faced the camera one last time, and spoke with quiet dignity. "The truth doesn't need balance," he said. "The truth just needs to be told." The cameras finally cut away, but not before capturing one final shot: Joy's empty chair. The most explosive confrontation in daytime television history was over. But its impact would be felt for years. What do you think of this unbelievable showdown? Was Joy Behar completely out of line? Or was she just trying to do her job as a journalist? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more breakdowns of the most dramatic moments in entertainment.